again, we have Ruby in the room. So if you don't see her face or hear her, she is our observer, but she may go in and out of rooms, or she'll stay in the common room. There's her heart saying hello. That's her wave. And then we have Upinyo holding the space on the other side of the ocean. There he is. You know who Upinyo is by now, no need to wave. We already met Mariki, because she's already been speaking to us. And of course, we have Beza, who's holding the who's our technical support for today as well. Okay, cool, all of that. So I'd like us to start off with a recap from last week. And so that I don't miss anything, I'm going to just have a browse here. So last week, before we get to the task, we gave you a task, right, of jotting down a few things, and this may help Edward and Alicia a little bit, in terms of just writing down some of the few things that you were still sitting with, or that others in the room may have been sitting with that were not said, what was still unsaid, right? So we asked everyone to just jot down what that could possibly be. And yeah, I think the thing that came out in the discussion was around learning from each other, the different perspectives. And the discussion also touched on issues that were facing youth, of course. And the things that came up from the US side was that the youth are, well, yeah, it's around closed-mindedness and issues of identity and stuff. And then the issues that came up for South African students, or rather South African youth, is the issue of unemployment. I think also the issue around access, or the politics of access, was also something that came up in the discussion. We also challenged this idea of Ubuntu, or the Kumbaya approach to Ubuntu. And we wondered what that might actually look like, or what Ubuntu might actually look like in our everyday. Another thing that came up was that Ubuntu is not dead in certain parts of the world. I believe that was sort of touched on by Sizwe last week. I don't think she is. See, she is here. So yeah, with her experiences from where she lives, coming from where she lives, this idea that Ubuntu can also be a kind of self-sacrifice, that, you know, it's not just about knocking on your neighbor's door for sugar, but it is about, you know, sacrificing yourself for the greater good. It's one thing to say, I am me because of you, but it's also another thing to say, I am willing to almost, you know, sacrifice myself or stand in the way of danger, so to speak. Well, not danger, now I'm making things up, but standing in the way for the greater good. Or, yeah, okay. We also identified that there are differences in how we frame issues in the global north and the global south. And this doesn't mean that we don't care about each other's issues, but we just noticed that there is a different languaging or a different framing around these concerns that were brought up last week. Okay, so now bringing us back to the task that we tasked you with last week, around what it is that we felt was still unsaid, what we thought was unsaid, or what we thought maybe others were not quite saying. This is the time for me to kind of get a little bit of feedback in terms of what it is that you jotted down. The floor is now yours. And again, I'd like to remind you that this is your space. This is the most talking that I do at the beginning and at the end. So the floor is open. Would anyone like to start regarding things that you jotted down, things that were unsaid that you felt you needed to say?
Did I go out of mind going?
Sure, thank you, Eddie.
Hi everyone, nice to see everyone again. The only point that I jotted down maybe last time that that I felt not necessarily that it was unsaid, just that I would have wanted to voice. And it's just the thing of when we were having the conversations yesterday and last week, and everyone was giving their feedback and stuff, I was also more just in a state of just wanting to listen and wanting to not necessarily just like experience and see what the different sort of takes and output from people will be. And I think that's also something that maybe went a bit unmentioned, is just to be immersed in the experience, which was for me the bigger part of last week's conversation, is that it was just really like my main benefit came from just being a part and being able to listen, because I also didn't necessarily, I remember, I think you asked a question about expectations. I also didn't necessarily have any expectations because I wasn't sure what to expect. I wasn't sure what sort of lines of conversations we'd be having. And I also definitely wasn't sure what our fellows from the States would be saying about certain things, because also this would be my first interaction like this. So that's simply what I jotted down, was that for me, my main takeaway, or the sort of thing that stuck with me that I never spoke about, was just that I found a lot of value and benefit in just literally just being in it and not having necessarily any expectations or anything to sort of have a frame of reference with, so to speak, if that makes sense. I hope that made sense.
No, it makes perfect sense. Well, for me, it makes sense. Thank you, Eddie. Does anyone else resonate with some of what Eddie said? I see, I can't read from there actually.
Lily.
Is it Lily?
Hi, good morning, everyone. Good to see you guys again. What Eddie said just kind of brought up something that I realized was in the back of my mind, but I didn't get a chance to express it. But I think I've learned that there's a lot of things that I've grown up with that weren't necessarily stereotypes. And I think through coursework and coming into college and trying to understand a lot more about those who live in Africa has kind of helped me understand a bit more, but there is so much more for me to learn. So I guess in some ways I'm a little, I try to be sensitive because I don't want to, step on toes or offend anybody, but I'm actually really excited to just learn and listen and kind of soak in what I don't know about others' perspectives, others' experiences. So I guess my thought is that where is our middle ground, and where do we kind of divide or have that friction of not understanding so well, or having a little bit more disagreement maybe in some sort of way, just so that can kind of we can kind of have that aha moment of, this is where we can kind of break down a little bit more what we do and don't understand about one another.
Thank you, Lily. If I heard you correctly, are you posing the challenge, or are you asking a question, or are you sitting with an expectation, or whether or not, not whether or not, but that you would have liked to hear a little bit more contrasting opinions, maybe something like that?
As a non-confrontational person, it's more of just an open-ended thought, but I think that would be okay. If it's healthy and respectful, yes.
Oh, okay, all right. I just wanted to be clear. Okay, anyone else identified or sort of wants to jump on what Lily has just shared? It's like, oh, Pearl, I see you. Go for it.
Thanks, Jericho. I think I kind of feel the same way as you just mentioned. Maybe it's because I joined last week's conversation quite late, and some of the things that were said in the feedback kind of made me feel like, oh my goodness, I think this is opening so much conversation and questions and asking, because it sounded like there was a lot of things coming up and a lot of different perspectives that were coming up during the closing session, which is why I ended up staying for extra time, only to find that I was the only one that stayed, and I had expectations that the conversation was actually going to continue. So yeah, that's what I was left with.
Did you write any of those questions down? You said that you had you were left with a few questions, or some of the things that people were saying were bringing up some questions for you.
Not necessarily questions. I just thought that maybe we would have wanted to discuss most of the things that we were hearing, and coming into realization of the fact that there is coming into realization of things that were said, perhaps something that that Caesar mentioned, that it would have brought about more conversations around that. That was just my expectations. I didn't necessarily have questions to ask anyone or to pose, but that was my expectation, which is why I actually stayed. I thought that maybe conversations are actually going to continue. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So what I'm hearing is maybe, I mean, and also I think it is echoing Lily, as you are echoing Lily as well, is around maybe sitting a little longer with something that can help us then say whatever it is that we're not sitting with. But then again, last week was about introduction and stuff, getting to know one another. So I'm going to hold that here, and hopefully we'll do that in this session somehow. If not, hopefully do it next time. Okay. Anyone else connecting with some of what's been said, or what was it that you were sitting with that you jotted down that you felt you needed to say but didn't? Sizwe.
I think what I would like to, something that keeps coming up in my heart is, it's really difficult to have conversations nowadays, especially across difference. And I love the fact that we are all very much deferring to one another and choosing to be rather kind. But I, for one, do also like a stirred pot. And I think I would love it if we could touch some sensitive areas, obviously with kindness, but I think without fear of being shot down, because necessarily we are so different, even the South African group, racially, socioeconomically, and then obviously transcontinental differences and things like that. So there's always necessarily going to be just such a world of difference. And I think I just want to put it out there that I would love to see some things shaken, but in a space where we know, and I think we've said this, but in a space that we know that there's grace. But yeah, that's it.
Thank you, Sizwe. I'm going to pose your request to the group without really, also intimidating the group. But I see a hand. Should I hold my thought, Joelle? I think you want to say something? No?
Yeah, but you can finish what you were saying.
No, if you're adding on to what Sizwe is saying, please say it, because I'm Just go for it.
So I definitely see like an apprehension amongst the group to like speak on certain things. And I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but I kind of feel like I've internalized that, and I don't feel that is as open as I anticipated. And a challenge that I kind of saw that has been on my mind for the past week is to sit with and challenge our individual understandings of community. Even with amongst the South African group, there was a difference of opinion of what Ubuntu is and how they see it within their communities. So I want to understand the division and the dilemmas and why the difference is there, and also here in the Americas, like how community is for us and the differences amongst it. And if we can get to that understanding and begin to have a conversation about that, we can understand why we see Ubuntu so different.
Right. Thank you so much, Joelle. And thank you all. I'm actually getting excited because you're kind of taking me off the plan, and I get excited sometimes when we have to improvise. And part of my excitement is going to be in this question. If there isn't anyone who's going to say anything now, maybe you'll say it later. But now the question I'm sitting with is around perhaps today. How do we frame today so that the space feels like a space of kindness, a space filled with a little bit of grace, a space filled with, trying to create less fear to speak? How can we as a group, I obviously cannot impose that on you. I'm just wondering if we could even just popcorn ideas. How can we make it safe for us to continue for the rest of this hour together? Anthony, did you just join us?
Yes, I did.
Okay, cool. Just to give you a quick summary, we're just basically touching on last week's task, which was around jotting down what it was you felt you hadn't said or what others may have not said. And what is coming up at the moment is actually this issue around feeling like there's a bit of apprehension, that people are not actually saying what they need to say, which is on topic, right? Which is the reason why we're having these dialogues, what makes it difficult to speak. There's like a sensitivity. It's almost like we don't want to, we're kind to each other, but we're not so sure if that's kindness is toxic, or if it's actually, if it's helpful or if it's not helpful, right? So now the question I'm posing to the group is, how then can we revisit the contract of us together today to make the room feel a little bit more safe or kinder or full of grace, so that we can have a little bit of debate, but with kindness, or, you know, opinions, differences across continents without killing one another. So the question is, how can we do that? It's an, yeah, you can popcorn some ideas. And we only have about, I'd say 7 minutes until maybe we need to shift a little bit more into the plan further. Let's see. Let's just see how it goes, actually.
This might be a bit elaborate, but maybe kind of like one of those debate formats where you take turns. I kind of like the ice cream game where we all had like a side, and we gave them a chance, and then we rebutted. And I thought maybe as individuals we could try that, if that works or sounds like a plan.
Okay, thank you, Lily.
I agree. I feel like we need to elaborate on our individual stances and how we see it first before we can have a healthy conversation.
Okay. Anyone else? I don't mean to pick on anybody, but Cesar, I think I got the framing around a space without fear and kindness, grace from you, actually. I'm wondering if you have any suggestions maybe on how that could be cultivated today, maybe too big an ask.
I don't think I can answer your question directly, but the one thing that does come to mind is just perhaps, I don't know, and this might be a generalization. I know that South Africans, we tend to be a lot more direct about things. It's what I've heard. So just, I don't know, maybe we could find a system of calling out if things come some type of way that wasn't intended. I'm not sure, but I do like the ideas that the ladies have introduced, but I'm wondering if we could find some safe words or something. I don't know.
Okay.
Maybe that's just going a bit too far.
No, I like safe word. That's not the plan. I see Anthony. Thank you, Cesar. Anthony's hand is up.
Yeah, I completely agree with Cesar. However, from my side, I do think it's important for us to recall that if you're wondering something, probably somebody else is probably wondering it too. My remark last week was quite intentional because I wanted to know whether Big Macs are the same size in South Africa as they are in the United States. And that was the prime opportunity to engage that. I don't think there's any other opportunity that I have to see if that's actually true. But on a more deeper point, I think we should remember that every set of instructions, every rule book, every playbook comes with intention, right? So perhaps it's not about needing the specific instructions. Oh, I must remember what so-and-so has studied. I must remember what so-and-so has done. And if I don't, then it's the end of the world because then I'm not a good dialoguer. Perhaps it's about recalling the intention or what the richer intention behind the engagement is. Because if we fixate on the rules, then we might come across a very mechanical sort of sterile environment where we're all just giving the memo and not actually engaging. So yeah, I think we should pay mind to the intention behind the engagement, but also do so quite respectfully. So yeah, that's just food for thought from my side.
Sure, thank you. Thank you. Okay, so I'm gonna try and sum it up a bit. So there's a suggestion to speak. Oh, I see a hand.
Yes, I just wanted to add, as far as with these sensitive topics, I just always think back of being slow to speak and quick to listen. So kind of just grasping what other people are saying before you respond. And I believe that would help us to be like less defensive in a sense. So just being mindful of other people's and respecting like their opinion first before we respond. I think that would be helpful, just to keep that in mind.
Okay, thank you. Do I say your name, like, how do I pronounce your name? Is it Jakala? Was it
Jakayla.
Jakayla? Kayla. Kayla, okay, sorry, my apologies. Okay, all right. I like how we started because it means we're all on the same page, sort of, at least feeling wise. We all get a sense that, okay, some may be, those that just joined us, again, I just want to reiterate that please feel free to have your cameras on. It makes me feel like I'm talking to people in a room. But if you can't, it's completely okay. Okay, so like I said, I like how we started, and I think it's important to also be mindful that we can expect respect in a room, and also maybe if, like as Anthony said about sometimes when you say something, someone else is probably thinking about it. So maybe that's one way of holding some of what perhaps you weren't able to say, but also encouraging you to not feel silenced at all in the space. But of course, that's up to you as a group to accommodate one another. I'm going to keep giving it back to you. Yeah. There was a suggestion for a safe word, but I'm wondering if we can maybe translate that into like a, I don't know, guys, I'm not sure. I think we can hold each other for the hour. Maybe I will do this will be the safe gesture. I'll be like, time out. Let's calm down. Let's be respectful. I'll just call out all the safe words of sensitivity, no fear, all that jazz, if that would help. Okay, now this brings me to the next bit of our program for today, and that is around, we're actually discussing it around what makes it difficult to talk about certain things. And I'm wondering what certain things are difficult to talk about, given last week's discussion around the challenges that you face, unemployment, what else came up? Why am I losing my train of thought? Open-mindedness, issues of access, and other things that came up, right? I'm wondering if there's anything in particular that we felt or still feel, or perhaps are thinking about right now, that is particularly difficult to talk about. You can draw from last week as well, or from the little schlep that I just said now. But what is difficult to talk about?
I believe it's difficult to talk about change because I feel as though a lot of us, well, personally, I feel comfortable with where I am, and to just think of change, like how it would be, like the differences and everything, even though you try to be open-minded, but it's still that safeguard of being closed-minded as well, like the fear of change and the outcome of it.
Okay, so fear of change as something that's difficult to talk about. Any other thoughts, perhaps on the same as Jakayla has shared, or something else that's difficult to talk about?
In short, labels, perhaps.
Labels, what do you mean? Please expand.
That's a tough one. I don't know if I hold any labels on me that are negative, but perhaps others do, and maybe addressing how that makes them feel, or how it makes their community as a whole feel, if it's not directly towards them as an individual, but the community.
Okay. I'm not sure if I'm clear yet, so I'm going to ask for an example. I'm not sure if I'm clear yet. Yeah?
Perhaps it's about your intelligence, or that you're unintelligent, or maybe it's your economic status, or maybe it's your what's the word I'm looking for? Your sexuality, your gender, your personality, something around those lines.
Okay, all right, I'm clear. Thank you, Lily. Okay, so far we've got, it's difficult to talk about change. It's also difficult to address or talk about labels, such as gender, sexuality, economic status, intelligence, and so forth. Anyone else want to pitch in before we get into the next official task? I see Samira's hand. Yes, please.
Thank you. Yeah, just linked to the previous comment in terms of labels. And I think the labels we touched on, so for example, sexuality, intelligence, also things like socioeconomic class, all of those type of things, which I think naturally in having these type of discussions crop up in our discussions, in our work, in the things that we're doing. And I think sometimes it's easy to talk about these type of things in a very academic way, which I've come across a lot in conferences that I've been at. So it's academics coming together or scholars coming together, discussing very real issues that people in the group may be facing as we talk about them. And I think, I'm not sure if I'm verbalizing this correctly, but I think it's important to realize that a lot of what we speak of are the lived experiences of people in the group. And so the way that we frame our discussion then shouldn't just be so theoretical, and we just need to be cognizant of that.
Sure, thank you for that. Yeah, because I think that the thing about academia is that it creates a safe distance, but also what you're bringing up is this idea of people in the room have lived experiences, which brings us back to the sensitivity around creating a safe space enough to talk about such issues. Thank you, Samira. Anthony.
I think Samira and Lily both touched on like very poignant topics when it comes to discourse, right? Okay, let's cut down on the elaborate language. Look, I'm scared of being wrong and I'm scared of offending when I speak about things, right? And I don't know how at certain points to make a respectful dedication, right? So perhaps I cannot, as a person of color, speak on the full lived experience respectfully, what it means to be a person of color in today's society, right? I can only speak from my sample space, right? The burden that has come from academia is now I must be politically correct, I must be academically correct, I must be socially correct, and I must do this right because I don't want to offend, right? And especially if we're in a forum like this where I see the recording button on the top and I'm scared of being repeated afterwards, right? But what I do think we can lean into, especially in a space like this, is what I would term negotiation privilege, where we have a little bit of freedom and we have a little bit of liberation to be wrong and to learn from it, right? But then that's where we'd exercise sort of the safe word and we exercise caution in listening. And so that's how we improve the discourse, right? So I think we need to relieve ourselves of that academic burden of being correct, of being an expert on everything so that I get to be an ambassador of the cause. That's very heavy. So I think that's the point. So I hope I came across clearly.
No, it was very clear. Thank you, Anthony. I'm not going to take another hand right now because of time, but I am going to ask by either sign of thumbs up or nods. So what I'm hearing is, again, the layer that's just being introduced is around political correctness and academia almost policing political correctness on its own, right? So I'm wondering if we're okay with working with the theme or the topic around labels. I think labels is the one that's coming up the best or the most prominent, yeah. Labels is a theme we want to talk about because it's a difficult one to talk about, particularly because we all have our own experiences around labels. And there's also another theme around the difficulty to change or to talk about change. Okay, so we have these two themes. I'm not asking for a vote necessarily. I'm just saying this is what sounds like it's most prominent. I'm wondering if we can work with that today. Could we work with labels? Yeah, I see nods. I see thumbs up, nods. Those with just names. I'm gonna go with. Okay, I see thumbs up. Good. Okay. You know, when you lead people into saying yes, and then you're like, oh, good, everyone agreed, but I coerced you. I hope I didn't coerce anybody, but I'm gonna take it as a good thumbs up. Okay, so the task is we're gonna break you up into breakout rooms for the next I want to say 20 minutes just because of time, honestly. I hope that's okay. Does that change anything? Is it easy to change? Or can I choose this?
Yeah.
30 or 20. Okay, 30 minutes. We're gonna break you up into breakout rooms for 30 minutes. And in these breakout rooms, I would like to invite you to consider what makes it difficult. We've already touched on it. We've already touched on political correctness. We've already touched on academia policing and all of that. But what makes it further, unpack it, maybe in smaller groups, more will come out. What makes it difficult to talk about labels? What labels? Perhaps you can be a bit more specific as to which label you'd like to consider in your group. Which labels are made difficult to talk about and why? Yeah. So you have 30 minutes, and I think we're going to split you, if the maths is going to allow us, we'll I don't know, we're going to split you into groups, guys. And in those groups, have this task.